Well, it's breaking news in an emergency podcast as Baylor and Steve Rodriguez are breaking up. The skipper is leaving the program after 7 seasons at the helm. We have an exclusive timeline on what led up to this move and a short list of candidates that Baylor could go after next. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Memorial Day and welcome into Locked On Baylor. I am Drake Toll, thanking you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Max Garner, former Baylor baseball player and our Daily Bears beat writer, will join us later on in the show. But first, Steve Rodriguez stepping down 197 wins and 146 losses as a skipper in 7 seasons. That is good enough for third most all-time wins. Now, this right here, Steve Rodriguez said in a release given by Baylor University, while a decision of this magnitude is never easy, I am at peace with it. 7 years is a long time at one place, and now it is time for a new voice to lead the Baylor baseball program. I will forever be grateful for the outstanding young men who have played for me. I'm just happy that I was able to help young men achieve their own goals. 2017 Big 12 Coach of the Year, 3 straight NCAA tournament appearances in 17, 18, and 19, but the Bears have not made it since. They were close in 21, but as you know, this past season was dismal. 26 wins to 28 losses, but an 8th place finish in Big 12 play. Injuries across the board, but really, and this is where we get to the timeline, it felt like the dugout just started to fall apart. Now, a big part of that is some skirmishes and things that went on behind the scenes in really around the midseason where an assistant athletic director was placed in the dugout to monitor the situation with Baylor baseball. That's when things seemed to be, definitely not headed in the best direction. So sources have confirmed an assistant AD is placed in the dugout. There were also alumni who came to Mac Rhodes in the athletic department and pled for Rodriguez to be replaced by another coach in name, Mitch Thompson. A lot of folks were coming to Mac Rhodes pleading about Mitch Thompson. All this kind of happening in the middle of the season. And then after the Big 12 tournament loss to Oklahoma State, there are reports that came out that athletic director Mac Rhodes met with multiple players, Jared McKenzie, Trey Richardson being a couple of those, sat down with them, talked through situations that occurred in the middle of the season, talked through Steve Rodriguez and his future at Baylor baseball. And then really what feels like the straw that broke the camel's back is the fact that there were 8 players, according to a source who had entered the transfer portal, and you had 15 players in total that had said they had expressed real interest in entering the portal, and that number even ranges to 20. So 15 to 20 guys that would have left the program had Coach Steve Rodriguez and his assistants come back to Baylor. So it's almost damage control that this move is made. Now, of course, it is said that Steve Rodriguez stepped down. Would Mac Rhodes have pulled the plug, or did he have to pull the plug behind the scenes? We don't know, and we may never know. But as it sits right now, had the move not been made, you're looking at the possibility of 15 to 20 guys leaving the program, and that would be detrimental to the baseball roster. As we know, too, you have a lot of parents that were upset with the current coaching staff that had gone to the athletic director. I've heard from multiple that actually went directly to the AD or the assistant AD with complaints, and with players and parents both unhappy, then you have today's announcement that Steve Rodriguez will be stepping away from the baseball program. And Mac Rhodes said, "We're grateful for Steve's time at Baylor over the past 7 years and for his commitment to our student athletes, our university, and preparing champions for life." That is huge, too. Steve Rodriguez was one of, let me just say this. The guy is a remarkable human being, was great at connecting Waco to Baylor, really loved getting involved in the community, loved having his players involved with the university, had so many academic all Big 12, just a really stand-up guy. That's one thing that I've heard from so many different parents, so many different past players and alumni he's interacted with, that he is a stand-up guy. And in all the personal interactions that I've had with Steve Rodriguez, he has been someone that I've enjoyed being around and has been such a kind presence to not just me, but also alumni and a lot of families as well. But you also have the news coming out of this that Rodriguez has yet to meet with the players. As of the recording of this podcast, there was a Zoom call at 12:30 on today, Memorial Day, where Mac Rhodes met with the current players, but Steve Rodriguez has yet to do so to our knowledge. Now, Mac in that Zoom call said to everyone that a new coach that came in, he asked, now, this may not be verbatim, but it was mentioned that entering the transfer portal, there's reason to hold off because he guaranteed the new head coach will sit down with every player individually, have discussions with them about their future with Baylor baseball, discussions about scholarship money as well, because as you know, there is so much that goes into that. But Rhodes will certainly act quickly, and I'm sure have a hire at least by July 1st, the end of the college baseball season when the World Series wraps up as well. If we know anything, it's that Mac Rhodes has been able to hire great head coaches at Baylor University, and this will be no different. The short list already. Mitch Thompson is certainly there. The head coach of McLennan Community College was an assistant baseball coach, an old Baylor baseball coach under Steve Smith, who was a part of the 2012 team, which is the best team in Baylor baseball history. Had that 24-game win streak in an unbelievable year that Max, who's going to join the show, actually played on. So you're looking at a coach that has a Baylor knowledge, right? He has a winning pedigree because he had a national championship at McLennan Community College, and you could hire him with these Waco and Texas ties. Unbelievable recruiter. It's almost tougher to recruit at a JUCO community college like McLennan than it is at a school like Baylor because you're recruiting guys to play for 1 or 2 years and then sending them right back out to a bigger school. So the prospect is there for Mitch Thompson. You also have coaches at DBU, Texas State, smaller Texas schools that have a lot of success. Maybe an assistant from Texas. We've heard murmurs about assistants from Tennessee and Texas both who will at least eye the job, and I'm sure Mac Rhodes will take a look at those as well. Now, there, of course, is no official short list yet. You're replacing Steve Rodriguez today, who, again, is third all-time in wins. This too, and this is a fun aside. You look at Mickey Sullivan, who was at Baylor for 20 years, was replaced by Steve Smith, who was at Baylor for 20 years, right? Both those guys really is 21 each. So those guys, number one, number two in all-time wins. Rodriguez was to replace Steve Smith. He was the third baseball coach in a 42-year span, only lasting 7 seasons at Baylor. So whoever you go for next, you're going to look for longevity. And Mitch Thompson, he's not old, but I don't know if he could give you 21 years. Does Mac Rhodes go there with a young, up-and-coming, budding assistant coach to take over this program? It's tough to say, but we'll have more as more comes out over the course of the week. Before we get to Max Garner and a discussion over Steve Rodriguez leaving and where the program goes next, I want to tell you about Bet Online. Bet Online, where the game starts, is your place to go for all things sports betting. Right now, go there right now. The NBA playoffs, NBA championships going on. I think it's the Celtics and the Warriors. Celtics and the Warriors. Go make live bets. You can do in-game live betting, which is super fun. Vegas-style casinos, all kinds of really, really neat stuff at Bet Online. You can check the lines for next year's college football season as well. Go to Bet Online. It's where the game starts. Just check out Bet Online. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Bet Online, where the game starts. Happy Memorial Day, everybody, and welcome into Locked On Baylor. I'm Drake Toll alongside Max Garner of Our Daily Bears, coming to you from Plano, Texas in a hotel room because Max, breaking news, waits for no man. And as someone who played with the Baylor baseball program and now covers them as a beat writer, did this come as any surprise?
No, maybe coming into the year, I had been asked by somebody else before the start of the year if Coach Rod was on the hot seat, and it kind of, it kind of was an epiphany moment for me after I really looked at everything and thought about it. After we got about halfway through conference play, I think, through my memory, that West Virginia series being kind of the real downturn towards the back end of the season, the writing looked like it was on the wall, and honestly, they were pretty non-competitive for the last part of the year, and that's really hard to watch. There's a difference between losing games and getting beat 16-4 every time you go out.
Yeah. This change too, again, I don't know if it's a surprise necessarily, but I know some folks still thought Rod would get an extra year. In everything you heard kind of leading up to this, was that what you believed to be true?
I thought he needed, had he made the tournament, for sure he's still in. Had they been even 2 or 3 spots higher in the Big 12, maybe we're not having this conversation, especially with a few injuries. But at some point, the injuries just happened in a bad season for him. It didn't really change what was the outcome for most of the time here. So it's always tough to change, and it's a tough decision to make, and the timing is the brutal part of it, because you got to go at a time where you can hire someone that you trust, and that where there's someone available, and where there's not, honestly, bigger jobs that can eat up some of these top coaching prospects. So it's always a tough decision, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go. But I think when you look at the last half of the year, something just really had to be done.
With this replacement, it feels like it had happened last year. You had a lot of coaches that were looking for a high profile name or somebody to take over their program. And it feels like Baylor could be the apex of a coaching search in this offseason. So I think that bodes well for them. When you think about immediately who you would want to see, I mean, not even just as a beat writer, but as a former player, right? That has that connection to the program, who you like for that spot. I mean, what are the names that come to mind?
I think it's no surprise that if you talk to anyone that I played with, or in the years, 15 years before I got there, we're gonna say Coach Thompson at McLennan before you even get to the end of your sentence. He's been at Baylor. He knows how to recruit Texas to a private school. He recruited for every successful team that Baylor had for 2 decades. Where the NCAA tournament was expected. Hosting regionals happened every few years. And it was known as kind of, with track and field and a couple others, as kind of the main winner in the athletic program for a long time before football and basketball took the turn. So I think it's an attractive job, and I don't think there's going to be a ton of other Power 5 or big baseball school positions available. And you got a beautiful ballpark and obviously a great athletics facility on the river to come to. So it just depends on what Mac wants to do. I think a quick fix is Coach Thompson, because he's got guys at MCC he could bring right over, and he knows the landscape.
Again, for those listening, Steve Rodriguez released a statement that he'll be stepping down as head baseball coach. 197 wins, 146 losses, 2018 Big 12 tournament championship as well. Rodriguez originally coming from Pepperdine. Max, you mentioned how even this season, had Rodriguez made the NCAA tournament, you felt like the leash was still there, right? That it felt like, well, let me even pitch that. Was it the fact that this season seemed like such a catastrophe? They were still playing for the Big 12 tournament down to the last 1 or 2 games in Big 12 play. Did it feel like this season just tanked so hard that it ended up being the end of the road for Rodriguez?
Yeah, and it was obvious that they were still talented, especially offensively. I know there was a lot of pitching injuries, but they shouldn't have been as far behind the 8 ball as they were by the time the big name starters started to have those arm problems, Now, all these pitchers having major injuries over the last couple of seasons is a whole different thing to talk about, and that might be for later on in the offseason. But because that's a huge red flag. These guys, only 1 or 2 of them are big time hard throwers, and everyone's still having their elbow pop. I don't really, you just don't see very often. But it's just a culmination of it all. I think there wasn't huge high hopes, but I think we all thought they were going to be competitive in every series they played this year and be just a solid 2 or 3 seed in the tournament and a good Big 12 team. And the only team that they looked better than for the last 2/3 of the season was Kansas.
Max, there were sources that told me earlier in the year that it was loading up for 8 to even 20 players to enter the transfer portal. I think 8 players have entered it since the end of the baseball season, with, again, 15 to 20 guys that are in that pool. And is that something that you've also heard? And does it feel like this move is almost a damage control to try to keep as much of the roster still here as possible?
Yeah, I've heard 8 as kind of the solid number. The sure thing with, as many as 8 or 9 more being on the fence. But, with the right hire, that could convince some to stay. It might convince some of them to leave, just depending on who you hire, how many people they're going to bring with them. It's all going to kind of depend on the situation. But, yeah, it really seemed like there were players going to. And that's really
when you think about the attributes the next head coach needs to have, and we've mentioned Texas being a big one of those. Can you recruit? You have the Houston area that is a hotbed for high school baseball players to come play at your university, and you talk about the other Texas schools like TCU, Texas, DBU, Texas Tech that recruit so well and have such successful teams. What does the next baseball coach at Baylor University have to have?
You have to know how to recruit at private schools, and I think that's why Coach Rodriguez was as attractive as he was for us at the time, was because it is a different playing field in baseball where you don't just get to pass out 100% athletic rides like basketball and football. You've got to know how to balance the rest of the cost that you have at a Baylor or, Pepperdine for Coach Rod before that. TCU deals with it. You have to have someone that knows that, but I think the project of having that person not be from Texas, didn't go as we thought. And I think you don't need to get on a plane to recruit a top 15 team to Baylor. And he seemed to still want to go and try to steal a bunch of recruits from California or get some diamonds in the rough from out there. And that's great, but you can go to Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio and fill your entire roster. And that just wasn't happening. And I mean, you can tell physically they were a small looking team. And I've even heard it from one of the players in the current roster that just said other teams are bigger than us. They hit more home runs than us and they throw harder than us. And at some point you can't coach around all of that.
On the flip side of that coin, when you're marketing this program to another elite college baseball coach, whether they be a head coach or an assistant, what is the luster of a Baylor program? It's been kind of in a rut for the last few years. How do you then pitch Baylor, the ballpark, Waco, to a head coach out there in waiting?
I think what helps right now is the rest of the athletic program and what the river, the project on the river all the way through the football stadium and the new basketball arena that's about to go up. That's all going to help because that looks so good for recruiting for any sport. And there is past success. I mean, for decades, we were expected to be top 25 just about every year.
Yeah.
And that's not anything to frown on now. It's going to be interesting to see which way they go. Do they want to go with a young and upcoming assistant who recruits for, teams that are pushing for the College World Series, or do they want to hire someone like Coach Thompson who, what you're going to get and he's going to be able to make Baylor, at least very competitive pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But he might only want to coach for 5 or 6 more years. I just don't know how long he would be wanting to coach until he's, kind of thinking about retiring. So that's what I'm really interested to see. Do they go after a young guy like Stephen Trout at Texas State, the head coach there, or one of these assistants at a big Power 5 school for the long-term play? Or do you do something like Coach Thompson and after a year or two have somebody as coach in waiting to be kind of trained into, recruiting to Baylor?
Max, before we close up shop, that's kind of where I want to camp out when it comes to Mitch Thompson. He's somebody that was an assistant under Steve Smith at Baylor in really one of the most successful stretches in Baylor baseball program history. You were on the 2012 team that was the best team in program history as well, hosted a regional, super regional, #1 in the country. So what is it about Mitch Thompson that you like so much individually and that would make him he's a proven winner at McLennan, but would make him the right fit at Baylor?
I mean, the recruiting thing is one part of it, but he's just tough.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I think that's what the rest of the athletic program looks like. Even when you look at a hire like Nikki Collin or something like that. I think he fits, even though he's old Baylor, I think he fits what Mac Rhodes has going on right now. And I think he would hire a very good, very young staff around him. That would be something that, you'd hope 2 or 3 of them could stick around long term, even if he doesn't plan on coaching, like I said, more than 5 or 6 more years.
Well, Max, kind of to close it out and close the book, Steve Rodriguez was somebody who was beloved, I think, not just by Baylor fans, but the community of Waco, too. He was so good. One of the nicest coaches you could be around or get to interact with. So kind of your thoughts on Steve Rodriguez, not just the baseball coach, but Steve Rodriguez, the person.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Rodriguez was always great to all of us, and he was very active on bringing back older players, especially the guys who are playing, but even guys like me who just kind of want to be around the program and want to know how we could help out. He was always open to talking to us and everything like that. So I think he'll get another job. He was successful at Pepperdine, and it might be a regional thing, and it's always just kind of about the fit. And with the way this athletic program is going right now, maybe it just wasn't the right fit. But he knows baseball for sure. So he'll get another good job, and I hope he does.
Well, I know you're pumping out a lot of content over there at ODB and continual updates on Baylor baseball and the coaching search, and even this move with Steve Rodriguez that's so fresh. Max, where can folks find you on Twitter and other places that exist on the internet?
Yeah, ourdailybears.com. I'm probably going to write something later this week after I kind of poke around a little bit, and with a potential candidate list and who I really think would fit, which is going to be more than one person. I just want to be as objective about, probably up to 6 or 7 candidates. Mac Rhodes is going to be thorough. So get something up on ODB here later this week, and on Twitter, MaxGBU21. But it's going to be exciting to see where they go. And hopefully, we probably won't know till after the College World Series. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But, Mac's going to be thorough, and I trust him.
Absolutely. Well, Max, thanks for coming on. And for all of you, thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day, the rest of the week. We'll have all things Baylor baseball coverage, including a coaching search on who will be the next skipper at the helm of Baylor's baseball program. This has been, always will be, thanks for listening to Locked On Baylor.